Hi, I'm Sherrill and welcome to my dining room. This is a fall panel quilt that we're going to do in this video. That centerpiece is one piece of fabric, and then I added two different borders around that panel. This is a really easy project to do, so let's get started. You can purchase the panel fabric from two places that I found it, but you can also compare and shop around to see where else. equilter.com, and they also ship outside of the United States. So if you're interested in getting it, they will ship outside of our country. Also fabric.com. I don't know if they ship outside of the country, but they might. The name of the panel fabric is Fall Festival Turkey Trot. The shade is warm brown and the size is 24 by 44 inches for that panel fabric. Now for your border fabric, the finished size of this quilt is 43 by 56, give or take a ½ inch or so. Now there's two different borders. The first border strip, you'll need 2/3 of a yard. That was the solid border, the yellow strip that went around the panel fabric. And for the patchwork border, the second border, it's going to depend on how many colors you want to appear and also how large you want each of your strips. And I'm going to give you suggested sizes in a moment. So you're going to need anywhere from 1/8 of a yard to 1/3 of a yard. The very first thing you need to do when you get your panel, of course, is to press it. Get all of the fold lines and wrinkles out of it. Now, if you choose to wash it before you make your quilt, do a zigzag stitch along the two sides that have the raw edges. All right, now you want to square your panel up. Now, sometimes it's really hard to get them squared because they've been stretched as they were wrapped around the bolt. So it takes a little time to get it squared up. So luckily this piece was fairly squared when I bought it. So what I'm going to do now is just cut the selvage ends off first before I try squaring it. So go ahead and cut the other selvage end off. After you've cut the selvage edges off at each end, you need to look at both sides of your panel fabric to see just how crooked those sides are. Now this panel piece was actually pretty straight. It's not off very much. Most of the time when you buy panel fabrics, they're kind of going all over the place. So this one is fairly easy to straighten out. So line your fabric up as best you can on your grid lines and see what needs to be trimmed off. So place your ruler on there, and you're going to line your ruler up on your grid lines up here so that you know it's nice and straight. And if anything is sticking out, then you want to go ahead and trim it off. Then, keeping this edge straight on a grid line, go over to the other edge, line up your ruler on the grid lines up here so you know your ruler is straight, and check to see what needs to be cut off on the other side, and then trim it off. Then after you've done that, leave both edges on your grid lines, don't move it, and then check out each end. And both of my ends were really pretty crooked, so lay your ruler down, make sure your ruler is lined up on grid lines, and then using your rotary cutter, go ahead and trim it off. Now cut out 4 strips that are 5½ inches wide, and make sure you leave your fabric folded to where the selvage edges are together. Then take your fabric and line it up on one of your grid lines. And if it's crooked, you want to take your ruler, place it on top, line up your ruler on those grid lines, and then with a rotary cutter, because you're going to get better results, trim anything off that sticks out. And then you would move your ruler over to where it's being cut 5.5 inches wide, and you just keep going down the fabric until you have 4 strips cut 5.5 inches wide. The next step is to take your strips and place them face down on top of your panel piece and line them up on the edges, and you're doing the 2 longest sides first. Pin them down and make sure that your selvage edges are extending out past this edge here. You don't want that showing on your quilt. Then stitch 1/4 inch all the way down, and then press always on the back side first, then unfold and press on top, and make sure that this seam is going towards the strip. And of course you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Then after you've got them both stitched on and pressed, now you're going to trim this overhang here. You're going to trim this off to where it's even with this edge. So place this edge of your ruler right on the edge of the panel fabric and line it up. Make sure everything looks nice and straight. And then with your rotary cutter, you're going to trim this off. And then go to the other corner, line it up right on here, nice and straight, and then trim it off. And then, of course, go to the other end and trim those ends off. Now take your last 2 strips and you're going to place them at each end, top and bottom, of the quilt. Lay them face down. Again, you're going to have the selvage edges hanging out past the edge here. Pin your strip down and then stitch 1/4 inch all the way across. Then at your ironing board, press your seams on the back side and then unfold and press on top, making sure that this seam goes towards the strip. And of course you're going to do the same thing at the other end. Then take your ruler, place it on this edge, and you're going to get an exact cut of this. And then of course cut the corner piece off. And you're going to do this at both ends in all 4 corners. The next step is to cut out strips of fabric for your second border. That's the border that has all the different colors in it. Now when you're selecting your colors, look at the panel fabric itself and pull out colors in that panel to help you determine what to pick. So I selected a light green and a dark green, then 2 golds, a light and a dark, 2 oranges, light and a dark, and then 2 browns, a light and a dark. Now this next step, it doesn't matter which colors are cut any particular width. You'll determine that yourself. But the greens, I cut them 2.5 inches wide. The gold, 3.5 inches wide. The orange, 4.5 inches wide. And the brown, 5.5 inches wide. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier is the number of colors to select for your patchwork border. I selected 8, but you don't need to select that many. But I highly recommend you select at least 3 colors. So now you're going to stack your strips 2 at a time, and you're going to cut all of them, no matter what the width is, 5.5 inches long. So place your 5.5 inch marker on the edge here and make sure you cut your selvages off first. So place that mark right on the edge, Make sure your ruler is straight across, and then go ahead and begin cutting your strips. Now I just stack them as I go, and now do it again. Place your 5.5 inch mark and go ahead and cut. And you would keep cutting until you have all of your strips cut. One of the things I discovered when I was cutting out my strips is that a few of them were slightly off. They weren't quite the right width I had suggested to you, but that doesn't matter as long as the length of them are 5.5 inches. That's what's important. So you can cut them any width you like and you can mix it up. Just make sure they're all 5.5 inches. Now you're going to randomly select different pieces and put them in any order that you want. There's no particular pattern, no rhyme or reason to it. So you're going to create strips that are going to go on the 2 longest sides. So make them longer than 52 inches. And make sure that a 2.5 inch strip is not at each end. So go ahead and stitch up 2 border strips that are a little longer than 52 inches. Now after you've stitched your little strip pieces together, you need to press all of this. So the first thing you want to do is press each seam on the back side. Then flip it over and keep your long border strip lifted a little bit. And you're going to press, pushing the seam all in one direction. Now my iron is not hot, so don't iron on your cutting mat. Make sure you're doing it on an ironing board. So make sure you press all of these border strips before you stitch it on to your quilt. Now you're going to take your border strip and put it face down on top of your quilt. Now make sure you have a little bit of fabric hanging out past each end so that we can trim it off later to be an exact fit. And of course, before you pin it down, you want to double check the other end to make sure there's going to be fabric hanging over this end here. So go ahead and pin your border strip down and then stitch 1/4 inch. After you've got your border strips stitched on, you want to go ahead and press the seam on the back side, the full length of that seam. Then unfold it, and you're going to press the seam on top. After you've done your pressing on both sides, then you're going to trim all 4 corners, and you're going to make it even with this edge of the first border strip. So place your ruler on the edge of that first border strip and cut your corners to be an exact fit. Remember, you're going to do this on all 4 corners. After you've stitched on the border on each side, remember you're doing the 2 longest side first. Now you're going to measure for how long your border strip needs to be up here at the top and the bottom. So you're going to measure this a little differently. You're going to measure from this raw edge right here. This is where this little patchwork square is and this yellow border strip. So make sure you measure from the end here, and it's folded going out away from the quilt. So measure from here all the way over to the edge here, and create your border strips that length. You will trim it exactly to that length. When you go to do the other end, measure that other end exactly. It might be just a little bit off, and if it is, you need to cut that border strip, whatever that measurement is. Now my measurement came out to 33 1/4 inches. So I pieced together enough of the different colors and trimmed it down to 33 1/4 inch. Then lay it up against the end of your quilt. Then at each corner, you're going to fill in a 5.5-inch square. So as you're laying your strip down next to the end, look to see what color you want to put in that corner. So in this corner, I put a brown, and then over at the other end, I selected an orange. So go ahead and stitch the 5.5-inch squares on each end of your border strip. After you have your 5.5-inch square stitched on at each end, you're going to press the seams, of course, on the back side, then press it on the front side, making sure you press this seam going in towards the strip, because you want it to go in the opposite direction of this one here. So after you've done your pressing, go ahead and match those seams up. Make sure it's in there nice and snug, and it should feel flat in there. And make sure you place a pin to hold it. Then go to the other corner and place a pin to hold that seam, making sure that the seams are in the opposite direction. Then continue placing pins along the edge. Then stitch 1/4 inch seam all the way across. After you've stitched your border on, then again you want to press on the back side, and then unfold and press on the front side. Then you would need to go and add on this border strip at the other end. But remember to measure the other end, because in my case, the other end of my quilt came out to 33 inches instead of 33 1/4. So I had to create a strip that was exactly 33 inches. Then add on your squares in the corner and stitch it on, and then as always, don't forget to press. Once you have your quilt top pieced together, then you're going to be ready to layer the quilt. And that means you're going to need to get cotton batting and to put fabric on the back. And then you will need to do your quilting stitches. I also refer to that as top stitching. And then of course after that is the binding. So in part 2, you will learn how to do all of those next steps. That video will be coming out within 3 to 4 days after this one is released. So if you don't see it immediately, don't worry, it will be out soon. So as soon as that video is released, you will see a link appearing in the upper right hand corner of this video that you can click on to take you directly to part 2. Well, I hope you try this fall panel quilt. Now, if you like this video, click on thumbs up. Also, click on share to share this video with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click on that red subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of your screen. Don't forget to enter your email address and click on the little bell so that you receive future email notifications about my latest video. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing!